I'm Asif Kapadia. I'm the co-writer and the director of Far North. I think it went well. I think we had a really good audience. We were in another cinema. They sold more than enough seats to move it to the biggest cinema. So really good turnout on a Monday night, and a lot of people stayed for the Q&A. And some really good questions. So yeah. The story came from a short story by an English writer called Sarah Maitland, who actually lives now up in Scotland, up north on an island, and she was an old friend of my co-writer Tim Miller. Tim Miller and I wrote The Warrior together, and she was an old friend, and we were going to see a film at the National Film Theatre in London, and I was running late, and outside the National Film Theatre on a river there's a second-hand bookshop, and so he was hanging around, and he was just looking at the books, and he saw a name that he recognised, Sarah Maitland, and it's a collection of her short stories, kind of long out of print. The shortest story was 4 pages long, and it was this story. It was the story of 2 women who live in the middle of nowhere on ice, a younger woman and an older woman. They don't talk to each other, they have no use for language, and one day one of them finds a man on the ice, and they have a simple decision: leave him and let him die, or save him and bring him home. Cold weather is really demanding, just to keep your body together and to keep thinking. It was -40 on certain days, and when the wind blows, the wind chill was just unbearable. So just communicating when you're like a couple of feet away from an actor can become really hard when the wind's blowing, you can't hear them. When I'm working on a script, I like to spend quite a lot of time figuring out where we're going to shoot the film, because then that kind of narrows down some of the options and gives you an idea of how it's going to be constructed. And so I spend a lot of time looking for, spending time with the indigenous people up in Norway and travelling around, figuring out how we're going to do it. And in the end, the island, which is where the 2 women live in the end, and where they find Sean Bean's character, is part of Norwegian territory, but it's like 2 hours south of the North Pole. It's the northernmost settlement in the world, really. The whole crew, when we were shooting the majority of the film, were living on a Russian ship. We were on an icebreaker. So there were no hotels, there were no transport, there's no cars, everything had to be carried by hand. And there were polar bears in the region, so we had people with guns that had to run around protecting us in case a hungry polar bear came along. It's quite a weird way of working. Not anyone on that film had ever kind of worked in that way before. We shot it in Norway, but I never really thought we were making a film about Norwegian indigenous people, mainly because actually the people I met there, Norway is very integrated, so most of the indigenous people are kind of blonde and blue-eyed. They look very much like Norwegians, and so the references that I found were all of these kind of Russian herders who look more kind of Mongolian, more Asian featured. And so for me, quite earlier on, I wanted to cast it with Asian actors. I worked with a casting director, and I just needed hardy actors. I needed people I could trust in that were going to come on this journey. So you'd meet actors and you'd spend half the time saying, please do the film, the other half saying, don't do the film. It's really not going to be fun. It's going to be really hard. There's no hotels, there's no cars, are you really going to be into this? And Michelle Yeoh is quite a tough character and wonderful, actually. And she said she read the script and was interested, and I met her, and we got along, and she said, okay, I'm going to do it. And then it took us a few years to get the money together, and she had a series of huge films that wanted her to be involved in their films, and she kept saying, but I'm going to leave this window free for this indie film. And she stuck by her word. She was amazing. Soda Pictures are releasing it later on in the year, in sort of September, October, I think, in the autumn is the plan, and then we'll see how it goes from there. So yeah.